Derek did not know why the guards dragging the silver-eyed woman felt wrong. He just knew that wrong feeling had never steered him away from something he needed to stop. Derek Shaw's instincts were as sharp as his tools, honed by years of dodging questions and scrutiny. As a low-level maintenance worker on the sprawling HFY space station, his job was simple: keep everything running without drawing attention. But that day, everything changed when he saw two guards escorting a woman down one of the rarely used corridors. Her silver eyes caught the flicker of light from an emergency exit sign, and they met Derek's gaze for just a moment before she looked away again. He didn't know who she was or what had her hands bound behind her back, but there was something in those piercing eyes that begged him to act, desperation mixed with defiance. He stepped out of his usual hiding place near the central maintenance shaft and approached cautiously. "Hey," he called softly into the dimly lit hallway, hoping to draw their attention away from the woman for just a second. But they didn't even glance at him. It was like she wasn't there at all, just an object to be moved. "Wait, that's not right," Derek muttered under his breath as he watched them turn and walk toward a heavily guarded entrance in Sector 9, where no one ever went unless cleared by the highest security level. His mind raced through possibilities. Was it something to do with those recent threats from off-world, or had she done something to earn their wrath? Something sparked inside him, a fire of stubbornness fueled by curiosity and a nagging sense that this woman needed help, even if he couldn't understand why. Derek ducked into the nearest maintenance shaft. He knew every inch of these stations better than any official document or map could convey. A quick glance at his tools confirmed what he already suspected. There was nothing out here to cause an actual power surge on its own. So when those guards had come by, he'd done something that wasn't quite sabotage, but not far off, just enough to give him the time and cover he needed. He fumbled with a small device in his hand, a simple circuit interrupter designed more for convenience than mischief, but now put to use creating chaos. A loud hum filled the air as power lines flickered. Lights went out suddenly, plunging everything into darkness save for faint red emergency lighting. "Come on," Derek whispered urgently through the dark tunnel system he'd crawled and skittered down so many times before it felt like home. The woman had been shoved ahead of him towards the restricted area. No, she was a free target in his territory. He moved faster now, navigating by feel alone, until he emerged behind where they were moving her. Without hesitation, Derek reached out into the darkness and grabbed hold of one arm. At first, there was resistance, but then understanding dawned on her face as he pulled her away from them. "Come with me if you want to live," he murmured gruffly under his breath while leading her down a series of vents designed only for accessing station systems, not people. He knew exactly where they led out through maintenance tunnels back towards the general population sections and freedom, or at least relative safety, until she could figure out what was going on. As they ran side by side in near silence over metallic grates and past exposed wiring bundles that would trip any other person into a tangle of alarms and security measures designed to keep them away from the rest of Hub 5's core structures, the woman beside him remained silent, her breath coming short but steady. Derek kept watch over both sides of their progress. She's instincts honed by years of working around the station's automated sentries, and made sure no one was following too closely behind either of them or ahead on potential escape routes. He stopped only once to let out a quick burst of data into his wrist calm, setting off another minor power surge somewhere distant enough not to alert anyone nearby while still disrupting any attempts at tracking her. Once that happened, they could feel the tension between their pursuers waver for just enough time to take one more turn and slip through an access door Derek had previously flagged as less secure than it appeared. Through this maze of ducts and pipes, they made their way toward a section he'd memorized well enough, several levels up from where the main population lived, but accessible via emergency exit points. It was here that his personal sanctuary opened out onto more familiar territory, shaded walkways with fewer eyes on them, places rarely traveled by anyone who didn't need to know about these secret passages. Finally reaching a vent hatch, he pushed open into an unused storage room where boxes were stacked haphazardly, but none blocking their way. He turned back towards the woman once they had both squeezed out of the tight space, no longer needing that dark cover now that there was nowhere left for them to go without alerting more people. She stood up, brushing off dust from her smuggled clothes and examining his face with those sharp silver eyes again. A flicker of something warm passed over him. Thena, sense of recognition, gratitude. Who are you? She asked quietly but firmly. He shook his head slightly. No way to explain everything right now without risking both their safety more than they already were, and he could tell from the look in her eyes that questions weren't going away anytime soon. Name's Derek, was all he said before turning back towards another exit route, leading them deeper into safer territory. They moved through darkened corridors and empty walkways alike, Derek guiding every step of the way with practiced ease. His heart pounded harder now than it had since they began their escape. Each second that ticked by meant fewer chances left for getting caught, but also growing concern over what he'd unleashed today. But his mind remained focused on one thing, and one person in front of him who would need all the help she could get until morning broke and reality came crashing down around them both. For now, just this moment mattered, taking her further from danger while avoiding any more complications. They slipped out through another emergency exit door leading outside onto a platform above ground level where few ever ventured except in emergencies or late night maintenance checks. Below them was the shimmering night sky full of stars and distant planets, reflecting off water below like some kind of cosmic mirror revealing their secret flight away from authorities' grip. Derek stepped back out into open air, but didn't let her see how nervous he suddenly felt. This woman held power beyond imagination, yet needed protection more than ever. He pointed towards a small shuttle bay on the opposite side of this upper-level platform, far enough removed that no one would think to look here for them so soon after their disappearance. Over there, Derek directed with more confidence than he truly felt in his voice. That's your way out. She hesitated only briefly before nodding firmly, moving toward it as if accepting both freedom and whatever challenges lay ahead, alone now that she had no clear path back to her former life or status. Once inside the shuttle bay, Derek stood at a distance while watching over them once more, his eyes scanning every possible route of return. He could almost imagine what was going through her, as confusion mixed with determination and maybe even relief, but he didn't wait for any answer beyond those steps forward towards freedom. Instead, he turned and began retracing their path back into the heart of Hub 5 again without looking back, not because he wanted to leave her behind, but because his place here was still just out of sight maintenance. No matter what happened next, no matter if she ever returned or found some higher purpose beyond this one act, they'd done enough. For now, at least, Derek Shaw had acted upon instinct once more, and in doing so changed everything for both of them without even knowing it yet. As he walked back into the shadows that were as familiar to him as any home could be, a cold realization hit. Tomorrow would bring questions and consequences unlike anything before, but today was about escape. They continued to crawl through darkened maintenance shafts for hours, Derek leading Empress Cirrus for Dominion by a rope head tied around her waist just in case she got lost or stumbled into danger. Despite being unused to such physical discomfort and exhaustion, she did not complain, not out of stoic willpower, but because asking questions would have only slowed them down further. "More water?" Derek asked as they rested on the cold metal floor near a partially open vent shaft leading deeper underground. He unclipped his emergency ration bag and offered her some dried fruit wrapped in plastic, which she accepted silently while studying him with piercing silver eyes that seemed to see through any pretense or lies he might hide behind. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked when they resumed their journey, the words barely a whisper against the cool metal surrounding them. Her voice was low and melodic despite her apparent weariness, but there was an underlying current of something more, a sense of disbelief at his actions that made him feel like he had to prove himself over and over. "Because you looked like you needed it," Derek replied with a shrug as they moved on through the tunnels. "That's enough." Cirrus stared back at him, her expression unreadable behind its regal facade. She seemed almost baffled by his straightforwardness, accustomed perhaps to more calculated motivations from those who would help a figure of power and status. Derek continued, leading them deeper into the station's intricate network of hidden passageways. Every now and then he paused at intersections or closed vents to listen for any signs of pursuit, but so far there had been nothing than the silence that stretched tautly between them like an unspoken tension. The tunnel they were in was narrow, with a low ceiling just barely tall enough to permit their passage without bending too much. Sweat dripped down Derek's brow as he pushed forward, his muscles burning from the exertion, but also fueled by adrenaline and purpose. He guided her through one turn after another until finally reaching an exit that led straight up into open air, a rare emergency escape route used only in dire circumstances. "Here," Derek whispered urgently as they approached a small hatch near their current vent. "Stay here for now." He opened it carefully, ensuring no alarms were triggered by his movements. Above them was the platform outside Hub 5's main structure, illuminated faintly under starlight reflecting off water below. "Few ever ventured up to this level except in emergencies or late-night maintenance checks." Derek turned back towards Cirrus, who stood waiting inside the vent shaft, her regal posture now slightly hunched from their journey, but still commanding respect despite everything that had happened so far. He placed a hand on her shoulder briefly before removing it just as quickly, a gesture meant to offer reassurance without overstepping boundaries. "Let me know when you're ready," he said quietly, while scanning the area around them for any signs of pursuit or observation from afar. "It'll be right here." Cirrus nodded wordlessly, understanding that his presence could only draw unwanted attention if discovered too soon after their disappearance. She watched him move away into deeper shadows before following up to the platform's surface. Once outside in fresh air, yet still hidden among darker recesses of Hub 5's structure, Cirrus hesitated for a moment longer than necessary, as though weighing her next steps carefully against potential consequences, both personal and political, back home within the Galactic Council. The night sky shimmered above with stars reflecting off water below, like some kind of cosmic mirror revealing their secret flight away from authority's grip. Derek pointed toward another section across this upper-level platform, far enough removed that no one would think to look there so soon after such an unusual escape attempt, a small shuttle bay often used for maintenance flights out into the vacuum without attracting much attention. "Over there," Derek directed with more confidence than he truly felt. "That's your way out." Cirrus nodded firmly, moving toward it as if accepting both freedom and whatever challenges lay ahead. Alone now, that she had no clear path back to her former life or status within galactic politics. She stepped cautiously forward while scanning the area around them once again before ducking down into the shuttle bay where Derek couldn't follow without risking discovery. Once inside, Cirrus hesitated just beyond the door frame, looking back over at him standing some distance away, yet clearly still watching their escape route carefully for any signs of pursuit or observation from afar. Her eyes flickered with a mix of emotions, confusion mixed with determination, and maybe even relief, but no matter what she felt toward this human who had helped her so unexpectedly, Derek didn't wait long enough to see it fully form on her face before turning back into the shadows himself. His place here was still just out of sight maintenance work, without much chance of being noticed if he remained quiet and unseen. Back in his own domain of dimly lit corridors, where few ever ventured, except those needing repairs or upgrades done far too late at night, Derek paused briefly to catch breaths that seemed to have stopped inside him entirely during their escape. A cold realization hit then, like a physical blow. Tomorrow would bring questions and consequences unlike anything before, but today was about survival first. Derek began retracing his path back into the heart of Hub 5 again, without looking back, not because he wanted to leave her behind, but because his place here was still just out of sight maintenance work. No matter what might happen next. His hands were already beginning to shake slightly from adrenaline wearing off and sheer physical exhaustion after such a long crawl through unexplored passages. No matter if she ever returned or found some higher purpose beyond this one act of assistance that had changed everything for both them, Derek Shaw's place was here in the shadows, where no one expected anything more than routine tasks done properly without fanfare. He knew he'd done enough already. Tomorrow would have its own challenges, but today they were free and away from immediate danger thanks to his willingness to act on instinct instead of fear or hesitation. As Derek walked back into familiar darkness that felt almost like home despite recent events, another cold realization hit him. The next day wouldn't just bring consequences for himself, but also new opportunities. If he could stay quiet long enough until then. Tomorrow might be about change beyond anything before, but today was simply surviving one more moment at a time. Derek felt his heart pounding as he emerged into a hidden section of Hub 5. Far removed from any main corridors or surveillance cameras. The air was thick with the scent of metal and ozone, but it was clear this part of the station wasn't regularly maintained by anyone other than him. He could still hear faint echoes of their escape guards shouting orders, distant alarms sounding, and knew they were running out of time. Cirrus stood near a small shuttle bay door, her luminous purple skin glowing softly in the dim light. She turned towards Derek, and he noticed she had paused to look back at him once more before stepping into cover. There was something unsettling about those piercing silver eyes as they met his own for one last moment. Then she disappeared inside the tight space behind a stack of maintenance supplies. Derek didn't linger long after that. There were still escape routes and blind spots he needed to clear, ensuring no guards would stumble upon them too quickly. He moved swiftly through familiar passageways until reaching an unassuming control room where only station mechanics like himself had keys. Setting up the next phase of their plan required quick thinking and even quicker action. As soon as Derek returned from his recon mission, Cirrus emerged cautiously back into the shadowed corridor outside her shuttle bay. She was still wearing dirty smuggled clothes, but now seemed more focused on strategy than anything else. Her silver eyes scanned every corner and crevice with an intensity that made Derek feel like he was being examined at a microscopic level. "Over there," she said, pointing towards one of the many maintenance tunnels branching off from their temporary hideout. "We need to get you out first." Derek blinked in confusion, but nodded without hesitation. He had always been willing to help others when they needed it most, even if he didn't know why or what might come after. They walked silently through another set of corridors, Cirrus leading the way with an air of quiet confidence that Derek found somewhat reassuring despite his growing unease about her true identity and their rapidly changing circumstances. The tension between them was palpable yet unspoken. Both were acutely aware this wasn't just some routine rescue anymore. Finally, they reached a dead end where several maintenance tunnels intersected in such a way as to form an almost perfect hiding spot for anyone trying not to be found by station security forces or Vorkith agents. Cirrus stopped and turned back towards Derek once more, with her regal demeanor suddenly softening ever so slightly. "We need somewhere safe," she said, voice low but firm. "Somewhere we can plan." Derek nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination rise within him. He didn't know how this played into his life, was just the guy who fixed things nobody else wanted to touch, but he knew one thing for sure: whatever happened next would define both their futures in ways neither had foreseen. With Cirrus's guidance, they found a small storage room off an often overlooked service hallway. It hadn't been used much and contained little more than old tools and spare parts stacked haphazardly against the walls. She quickly began sorting through them, while Derek scanned their surroundings for any signs of unwanted company. "Who are you?" he couldn't help but ask once they were relatively secure behind a heavy door designed to keep intruders out rather than in. Cirrus paused her searching and looked directly at him with those piercing silver eyes. There was something almost wistful about the way she smiled faintly before speaking, as if realizing for perhaps the first time that someone might actually care enough to ask such a question without knowing what the answer would be beforehand. "Empress Cirrus," she said simply but authoritatively. "Vorkith Empress Cirrus for Dominion." Derek blinked several times in rapid succession, trying desperately not to stare at her while processing this revelation. He had known there was something different about her from the moment he saw those guards dragging an unconscious woman towards a secure wing. Now that knowledge coalesced into clarity sharper than any blade. "So, you are safe now?" Derek blurted out before thinking better of it, his voice tinged with hope and uncertainty simultaneously. Cirrus almost laughed in disbelief. The sound was both beautiful and chilling given the gravity of their situation. "I have no guards," she explained grimly. "No allies here on this station other than Yuan. Now a coup is underway while my rightful place as ruler remains vacant due to circumstances beyond anyone's control." She paused briefly before adding, "Safe isn't quite accurate under those conditions." Derek nodded gravely in understanding. The weight of their predicament settled heavily between them, unspoken yet unmistakable. "Then let us Roman 9 that," Derek said resolutely after a moment's contemplation. "What do you need?" Cirrus studied him for several long seconds before her expression softened marginally. There was an almost reluctant gratitude in those silver eyes as she acknowledged the help had already given without knowing what might be saving. "I will begin establishing communication with sympathetic factions and potential allies across various parts of space," Cirrus said. "Your role would likely involve providing logistical support, ensuring my safety during these initial negotiations." Derek considered this silently before nodding in agreement. He knew his skills were limited to mechanical fixes and occasional clever thinking under pressure, but felt a strange kinship with this woman who'd once been Empress of the Galaxy yet now found herself as vulnerable as anyone else. Over the next few hours, Cirrus worked diligently on her side, while Derek continued monitoring their surroundings for any signs of pursuit. They shared minimal words beyond quick updates and requests, but maintained an unspoken trust that went deeper than either cared to admit openly at present moments. Cirrus had brought a small device from earlier that emitted faint signals capable of reaching sympathetic allies across different sectors without raising immediate suspicion from station security systems monitoring communications channels closely for any signs of unauthorized transmissions. Derek watched as she expertly manipulated these settings using precise commands only someone familiar with high-level encryption protocols could manage efficiently. He couldn't help but marvel at her composure under such intense pressure, even when his own nerves began to fray slightly due to prolonged stress and fatigue. Cirrus remained utterly focused on the task ahead. It was clear she had faced far worse situations in her past, and yet still found herself reliant upon someone like Derek for continued survival. By dawn's early light filtering through tiny gaps between metal plates lining their makeshift sanctuary walls, they began formulating concrete plans aimed at restoring order and stability to regions currently embroiled in chaos following news of her kidnapping. Cirrus outlined a strategy requiring careful coordination with key figures across multiple star systems, leveraging diplomatic channels alongside covert operations designed to undermine the usurper's authority before rallying support for legitimate governance once again. Derek listened intently as she spoke through various encrypted devices, her voice carrying commands and requests that sent shivers down his spine due both to their gravity and the sheer magnitude of responsibility now thrust upon him. He found himself nodding in agreement with most aspects, but also interjecting occasional suggestions based purely on common-sense insights derived from years working within HFY's intricate network. As dawn broke outside, casting long shadows through narrow gaps in metal walls surrounding them, Cirrus turned back towards Derek once more after finishing a particularly intense call. Her silver eyes met his brown ones steadily. There was something different about the way she looked at him, almost as if seeing someone new rather than just another human mechanic willing to assist when needed. "Thank you," she said quietly but firmly, her voice carrying an unspoken depth that went beyond mere gratitude or politeness. "Your assistance has been invaluable." Derek felt a surge of warmth in his chest despite lingering doubts about how much longer he could stay involved without drawing unwanted attention himself. "No thanks necessary," Derek replied with characteristic humility, mixed subtly now with burgeoning pride at having played such an integral role in something far larger than any repairs or maintenance work ever before. "Just glad I could help." Cirrus nodded slowly, as if considering his words deeply, then turned back towards her current task of sending out more encrypted messages aimed at rallying support across various sectors affected by the recent power vacuum left behind after news of her supposed death reached galactic ears. Outside their sanctuary remained a world still reeling from sudden political upheaval and uncertainty within it, though lay hope slowly taking root among those who dared dream beyond immediate chaos. Derek's place here was no longer just fixing things but helping shape futures yet to be determined, all because one morning he saw someone needing aid more urgently than ever before. And so as dawn turned into daybreak across HFY and the wider galaxy beyond, two unlikely allies prepared themselves for challenges greater than either could have imagined alone. For Derek Shaw, former low-level maintenance worker and Empress Cirrus for Dominion of the Galactic Council alike today, marked both beginning and end to an old way of life, while ushering in new opportunities fraught with danger, but also potent transformation. And dawn broke outside their sanctuary, casting long shadows through narrow gaps in metal walls and bathing everything in an eerie half-light that seemed to pulse rhythmically as if in sync with HFY heartbeat. Inside, Derek and Cirrus were already hard at work planning the next move. They had little time left before the usurpers solidified their grip on power further, making every second crucial. Cirrus leaned over a makeshift command center she had set up using confiscated technology from her captor, small screens displaying maps of the station's vulnerable points and communication channels that needed to be compromised or commandeered for their purposes. Derek hovered nearby, his eyes scanning through schematics and blueprints he knew like the back of his hand, but now seeing them with fresh urgency. According to these logs, Cirrus said quietly after scrolling through a series of encrypted transmissions on her screen, the coronation ceremony is set to begin in less than 12 hours. They plan to install Vexthar as the new Empress. Derek nodded grimly, his fingers already moving over another console he had rigged earlier that day, running diagnostics and tapping into emergency power lines designed for exactly these kinds of situations. How do we disrupt this? Derek asked practically, knowing full well how much time they needed if their plan was to have any chance of success. Cirrus paused from her work long enough to look at him directly with those piercing silver eyes that seemed both ancient and unyielding in their resolve. We expose them, she said firmly before continuing quickly over the details, already anticipating his questions about specifics. We'll use your knowledge of these systems against theirs, Cirrus explained, as if reading Derek's mind yet again. She pointed towards one screen showing vital information on communication frequencies used by HFY's administrators and security personnel. We hijacked their channels during key moments leading up to the coronation, so that everyone sees exactly what they've done. Derek understood immediately. Showing footage of her kidnapping would be damning evidence against those responsible, but getting it out there in a way that reached critical masses without being intercepted was another matter entirely. He turned back towards his consoles, his fingers flying across keyboards and control panels as he began hacking into secure networks and rerouting signals according to their planned timeline. With each successful hack, Derek felt an adrenaline rush mingled with anxiety. Every second counted here. Meanwhile, Cirrus continued organizing loyalists from within the station who had managed to evade capture by the usurpers' guards, thanks partly due to Derek's earlier distractions. She issued direct orders while also sending out encrypted calls via trusted diplomatic channels across multiple star systems. We need these allies, she said to herself, as much as her team of loyalists standing behind her, to apply pressure from all sides. Derek watched in amazement at how efficiently Cirrus was coordinating this counterattack. He had seen political maneuvering before, but nothing quite like this, a blend of brute force hacking and strategic diplomacy executed with ruthless efficiency by someone who clearly knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. As they worked side by side, Derek couldn't help feeling a profound sense of purpose unlike anything had ever experienced. His actions now mattered far beyond just fixing things. They were shaping the fate of an entire galaxy caught in political upheaval because one woman's rightful place had been usurped unfairly by those who wanted power at any cost. This is it, Cirrus declared suddenly once their initial preparations seemed solid enough to move forward, her voice carrying an authority that demanded everyone listen. "We gather loyalists and strike now." Derek nodded silently in agreement as he prepared his final hacks into placid very heart of the station's communications infrastructure targeted for maximum impact. As dawn transitioned seamlessly into daybreak throughout Hub 5, Derek and Cirrus made their move simultaneously from within two different but equally crucial fronts, disrupting communication channels while rallying support among loyalists. Derek navigated through layers of security protocols with ease, now accustomed to these kinds of challenges since childhood spent tinkering around such systems in search of shortcuts or backdoors others overlooked. This time, though, he wasn't just fixing things, he was breaking them strategically and then re-establishing temporary control over critical pathways so that all eyes would see the truth when it mattered most. Simultaneously, across the station's command centers and security stations manned by those still loyal to Cirrus, small groups began assembling quietly but quickly. Orders filtered down through encrypted channels, telling each grow up where they needed to be for specific parts of this coordinated assault on both physical locations and digital infrastructure alike. Cirrus herself led a team directly towards the heart of operations, from which Vexthar was set to emerge officially as Empress in front of assembled dignitaries representing key planetary systems. The corridor ahead stretched ominously straight under harsh lighting that did little more than accentuate the cold, sterile environment meant to house only those with clearance levels beyond imagination. But Cirrus had her own formidably high level now and carried it with a grace and authority so powerful no guard standing in their path could resist bowing to its implicit command. Behind them came Derek along with loyalist guards who would likely never notice him under normal circumstances, but were suddenly forced to see the human mechanic as part of something far greater than they ever imagined possible. The countdown began officially inside half a dozen crucial locations simultaneously: security control centers, broadcast towers transmitting official statements and propaganda from the usurper's camp, and finally, at Cirrus' designated point just outside where Vexthar would take his place in history as Empress of the Galactic Council. Derek stood shoulder to shoulder with guards who now recognized him only through necessity. The sense of impending action was palpable. Every breath seemed charged with tension that crackled between them, all waiting for that moment to finally unleash years' worth of frustration and rebellion against those attempting tyranny over free wills and democratic processes alike. Cirrus led this charge forward without hesitation or doubt, her footsteps steady yet purposeful, as if walking into a place she had always been destined rather than one just reclaimed through sheer force of character. She held herself regally, even amidst the chaos, moving with an elegance that belied any physical threats surrounding them. And then came the moment they all knew it was here, when Cirrus's voice carried over every single channel now under their control. "This is Empress Cirrus for Dominion speaking," she announced clearly and unequivocally into a handheld device linked directly to each of these hijacked networks. "My people, I am alive and your true ruler has returned." A ripple spread outward from her declaration across Hub 5 faster than any physical movement could manage. Greens flickered as they switched suddenly between official propaganda previously transmitted by usurpers regime, now replaced with footage showing Cirrus's capture, along with damning evidence of their treachery against both laws governing succession within Council and basic human rights concerning freedom. Vexthar himself appeared on these screens next, standing before assembled dignitaries ready to crown him amidst pomp and circumstance, only to be halted by this sudden revelation striking everyone present like a thunderbolt through heart of ceremony itself. He looked utterly shocked, then increasingly furious as realization dawned upon his face. How could he have been so thoroughly outmaneuvered? As uproar erupted within the main hall, where coronation had just moments ago seemed inevitable, Cirrus and her contingent pressed onward unimpeded by what should have been heavy resistance, but now faced outright confusion among those who'd sworn allegiance to their newly fallen champion. "Seize him," she ordered through gritted teeth once they broke into view of proceedings, eyes locked onto Vexthar standing rigidly amidst chaos he clearly hadn't anticipated facing, let alone surviving long enough within its midst. Derek found himself charging forward alongside Cirrus and loyalists, no longer just a faceless mechanic, but one integral piece among many moving together towards common goal now visible far beyond immediate skirmishes ahead. His heart pounded fiercely against ribcage as adrenaline surged through every fiber of being, yet never once did he falter from path chosen long before ever meeting true ruler of Galaxia. And then it was over almost as quickly how had begun, with Vexthar arrested mid-crown under weight of evidence damning his cause alongside those who'd supported him. Outside their sanctuary, a world still reeling from sudden political upheaval and uncertainty, within it lay hope slowly taking root among those who dared dream beyond immediate chaos. Derek's place here was no longer just fixing things, but helping shape futures yet to be determined, all because one morning he saw someone needing aid more urgently than ever before. And so as dawn turned into daybreak across Hub 5 and the wider galaxy beyond, two unlikely allies prepared themselves for challenges greater than either could have imagined alone. For Derek Shaw, former low-level maintenance worker, and Empress Cirrus for Dominion of the Galactic Council alike, today marked both beginning and end to an old way of life, while ushering in new opportunities for all. Key with danger, but also potential transformation. Andy Derek woke to a hush that hadn't settled over Hub 5 in years, not since before Vexthar's rise and his relentless campaign of propaganda and deceit. The streets were empty, but Derek knew he wouldn't have seen many even if they weren't. It was still early. Most would be preparing for the grand coronation ceremony scheduled to commence shortly after sunrise. He dressed in a familiar work uniform, though it felt different now. The insignificance that had once defined him seemed hollow, replaced by an unspoken sense of purpose and pride. The maintenance tunnels were his domain, known only to those who worked alongside broken pipes and flickering lights. He moved swiftly through them, navigating towards the upper levels where he would join others in watching the grand spectacle from afar. The morning sun filtered dimly into the corridors as Derek climbed, the metallic clinks of old machinery echoing around him like a silent symphony. When he reached his post, the small balcony above one of Hub 5's largest ceremonial chambers found several other maintenance workers already there, their faces drawn, but eyes bright with anticipation. "Morning," Derek said quietly to no one in particular as he leaned against the railing overlooking the grand hall below. It was massive and ornate, its center dominated by a raised platform adorned with intricate patterns symbolizing unity across the galaxy. Today it would be Vexthar's throne instead of Cirrus, but that wouldn't last long. As Derek watched from his vantage point above, he saw activity beginning to stir within the hall below, the kindling of flames around torches, servants preparing seating arrangements for dignitaries, and a sense of order imposed upon chaos. He wondered if Vexthar had been informed about Sirius's sudden return, or whether today would truly see him crowned under false pretenses. The air crackled with tension as the moment approached. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the first notes from an ancient choir filtered upwards and out into the balcony where Derek stood alone among his forgotten peers. The crowd below began to stir. Whispers turned into murmurs, which in turn grew into thunderous applause. Derek's eyes darted across the hall as Vexthar ascended the platform amidst a sea of admiration from those who had been swayed by his rhetoric and intimidation tactics. Yet even now, there was something about him that felt hollow, almost desperate, like a performer knowing the show would not go on forever. And then she appeared, Empress Cirrus Vordominion herself, walking with an unwavering presence through the gathering storm of bodies below towards Vexthar's podium. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. His coronation was set in stone. But here stood Cirrus, her regal beauty and commanding aura cutting through any illusions surrounding her captor. The crowd fell silent as she stepped onto the platform, an unmistakable command emanating from every movement of hers. "I am alive," she declared clearly into a handheld device linked to countless screens across Hub 5. "Your true ruler has returned." Shock rippled outward. It was impossible for most people here who had been fed lies and half-truths for so long. Cirrus continued, speaking directly to them now through their monitors. "My capture was orchestrated by those seeking power over you all rather than leading us toward unity." Derek felt a surge of pride at the sight before him. Cirrus' unwavering resolve in reclaiming her rightful place despite everything that had happened since she'd been taken. His heart swelled with admiration mixed with an overwhelming sense of relief. But then Cirrus's gaze turned upwards, catching Derek off guard as it seemed to pierce right through his hiding spot above the ceremony. She paused momentarily before calling out loudly over the assembled crowd, "That man up there." Whispers broke into murmurs among those who hadn't seen her motioning to Derek yet, but once eyes followed hers towards the balcony where he stood, every conversation halted abruptly in shock. "Bring him down," Cirrus commanded firmly. The audience below hesitated for a moment before several individuals began climbing stairs and making their way up toward Derek's location with cautious steps. Derek's hands shook as they pulled at his shirt sleeves nervously, but there was no escape this time. Knew exactly what he had to do. As attendants reached him, one of them gently guided him forward while others opened a path through the crowd below, allowing Cirrus and Derek face to face for everyone watching around. Cirrus looked up from her place upon the dais with an expression that spoke volumes. Gratitude mingled deeply within stern determination as she addressed those assembled. "This man," she began loudly, gesturing toward Derek, who stood awkwardly beside her now, dressed simply in his maintenance attire, "saved your true empress." A murmur spread across the audience. Disbelief gave way to murmurs of awe and recognition. "Months ago, when I was taken from this station by those seeking power over all others," Cirrus continued solemnly, eyes locking onto Derek's, with unspoken understanding passing silently between them. "He found me struggling against captors, dragging me through shadows of maintenance tunnels." Derek shifted uncomfortably under the collective gaze, but stood tall nonetheless. She's actions weren't about glory or recognition now, they were about truth being told. Cirrus smiled softly, gratitude plain in her expression as she continued, "Without knowing who I was, he helped because it felt right. Not a hero seeking fame nor acclaim, but someone seeing injustice and acting out of compassion." Gasps rose from the crowd below while applause erupted above, men and women alike recognizing Derek's quiet act of defiance that had given Cirrus hope in her darkest hour. Cirrus then stepped forward, turning toward him with an almost hesitant grace. She reached for his hand, as if to ensure he understood just how deeply these words mean not merely empty praise, but a connection forged through shared moments of peril and survival. "You helped me when I needed it most," she said softly yet clearly audible across the chamber. Derek felt warmth spread through him, a rare sense of validation in this moment where his actions had been acknowledged without pretense or expectation for reward. "And now," Cirrus declared, turning back toward her gathered supporters and beyond into wider audience watching via screens around Galaxy, "today marks not just my return to rightful place as Empress, but also recognition given to those who dare act with courage regardless of consequence." She paused momentarily, allowing gravity of words sink in before continuing. "Derek Shaw, a man whose bravery far exceeded title ever bestowed upon him." More applause erupted through the hall, cheers and nods from all sides reflecting unity born from shared truth amidst deception. "From this day forth," Cirrus continued solemnly, "you will be remembered not only as mechanic, but champion of justice who saw beyond labels to act with pure heart." Tears welled up in Derek's eyes despite efforts at restraint. His was more than he could ever have imagined asking for or even considering possible after his initial impulse had led him down path fraught with peril. Cirrus reached into her robes, producing small medallion inscribed with emblem representing unity and justice across Galaxy. She placed it gently around Derek's neck as crowd watched on in silent reverence. "This is a token of gratitude, Mr. Shaw," she said softly but earnestly, voice carrying clearly through chamber, filled now not just by sounds of celebration, but profound shift towards hope. Derek swallowed hard against lump forming threatening to choke him. He looked down at medallion resting heavily upon his chest, feeling weight far greater than its physical presence conveyed. Cirrus stepped back, then turned formally, addressing those gathered once more. "Today marks an era marked by tyranny and false promises. We stand now on cusp new beginning shaped, not just laws, but mutual respect among species." Chants of support rose around hall. "Empress Cirrus," echoed loudly from every corner amidst cheers. Derek watched in awe as Cirrus returned to her throne, symbolically reclaiming power she had been unjustly stripped away months ago. It was a moment that would be etched into history, but more importantly, into hearts across Galaxy, showing even one small act could change everything if driven by right intent and courage beyond fear of consequences. With ceremony now properly underway amidst cheers and applause, Derek made his way back to familiar confines above Grand Hall, feeling weight lighter yet somehow heavier as he returned among peers. There was no longer any pretense about his role here, had been seen truly standing shoulder to shoulder with Empress who ruled Galaxy, but also humble worker whose actions spoke volumes beyond titles ever held. As dawn gave way fully into morning light filtering through upper levels of Hub 5, Derek stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing now that sometimes courage took form not just grand gestures witnessed by millions, but quiet acts performed in darkness for sake of truth and justice. And tonight, as he slipped back among familiar faces, she's place would always be here, no longer merely maintenance worker, but part something greater being built every day. And so amidst dawn breaking over new era, Derek Shaw prepared himself alongside Empress Cirrus for dominion, not just fixing things broken or maintaining status quo, but shaping futures yet to take shape. A world reeling from recent upheavals, now held breath waiting for next chapter, a future guided by shared ideals rather than imposed ones. A&D, the grand hall of Hub 5, was still buzzing with excitement and relief as Derek made his way back to his workspace in the maintenance tunnels above the main level. The air buzzed with a sense of new beginnings, but it felt surreal for him. Thigh's unlikely hero who had stumbled into greatness by accident. Derek stepped out from behind the wall that concealed the access hatch leading to the hidden passageways he knew so well. He took off his grease-stained coveralls and replaced them with cleaner clothes before making a final check of the engines once more. They hummed softly, indicating they were running smoothly, his meticulous work ensuring everything was in order. As Derek finished up his tasks, Cirrus appeared at the hatch entrance, her presence commanding yet gentle. She had changed into formal attire now, but there was an ease about her demeanor that suggested she appreciated him as much for who he was off duty as she did on duty when he stood beside her throne. The medallion around his neck felt heavier with each passing moment. It weighed more than mere metal could ever account for. "Derek," Cirrus said, her voice soft but clear, catching the attention of those in the maintenance tunnels who had been keeping an eye out for him. "I have something to discuss with you." He turned to face her, nodding respectfully without breaking his casual stance. The crowd gave them space immediately, knowing that private conversations were necessary between a hero and their benefactor. "What is it?" Derek asked as he straightened up from under the engine console, where he had been inspecting one of its vital components. "Did you need something fixed?" Cirrus chuckled softly, her silver eyes sparkling with amusement. There was a fondness in that chuckle. She genuinely enjoyed his straightforward nature. "Actually," Cirrus said, walking closer to him and taking off the regal cloak draped over her shoulders, handing it to one of the nearby guards who had been watching from afar. She didn't need all this pomp around her when speaking with Derek. "I wanted to thank you properly for what you did," she continued earnestly, as they stepped aside into a quieter corner where whispers carried faintly but not clearly enough to overhear their conversation fully. "You know, beyond the public ceremony and tokens like that medallion." Derek's brow furrowed slightly at her words. He was never one for grand gestures or titles. The simple act of helping another being in need had been more than enough reward. "Did you really think I wanted anything?" he asked quietly, looking down but unable to hide the soft flush that colored his cheeks from such praise. "I did what anyone should have done." Cirrus sighed softly, placing a hand gently on Derek's shoulder as she looked into his eyes earnestly. There was something almost desperate in her touch, an urgency that went beyond gratitude. "Derek," Cirrus began again slowly, choosing each word carefully, "you saved me when I needed it most. You acted without knowing what would come of it. You trusted instinct rather than calculation. For this, there is no compensation adequate." She paused a moment, then continued firmly, with renewed determination in her voice and eyes. "I want to give back something meaningful, something that reflects the value of your actions." "Look," Derek interrupted gently but decisively as he turned to face Cirrus fully now, his hands resting on her shoulders, holding her gaze unwaveringly. "You don't need to do anything like this for me. I didn't help because there was a reward in it, just that right thing felt necessary." Cirrus blinked slowly at the earnest conviction shining through Derek's eyes and tone before smiling softly back up at him, a genuine, heartfelt smile rather than one out of duty or necessity. "I understand your reluctance," she said warmly, "but please hear me out nonetheless." She paused again thoughtfully, then offered a suggestion with tentative hope in her voice. "You could work as Imperi, the maintenance chief, have access to some finer things compared to usual duties here." He considered this for a moment, his thoughts going through practicalities before nodding slowly and offering another counter-proposal. Can I keep doing maintenance, but on your ship instead? It's probably nicer than the tunnels down there. He gestured toward where he had spent so many hours over the years. Cirrus laughed at a sound that was a rare treat to hear, especially with such genuine warmth accompanying it. She hadn't expected this level of humility from him, and found herself touched by his honesty. All right, she agreed easily enough, then paused thoughtfully before adding sincerely, you may have whatever you wish. Derek's eyes widened slightly in surprise at her willingness, but quickly settled back into thoughtful consideration. I want to be nearby, though. His tone left no room for negotiation or doubt. He was loyal and protective, without needing anything tangible in return. She smiled again, this time with clear recognition dawning over her expression. You will always have that, she promised solemnly before stepping closer, so they were standing shoulder to shoulder once more. She reached out to place a hand gently on Hi's arm, a small gesture, but one laden with meaning beyond words could express. Then it settled, Cirrus said finally, nodding decisively as if sealing an unspoken pact between them. I'll keep my engines running and be part of shaping our future together. He grinned widely now, feeling a sense of camaraderie wash over him despite the formalities around them. Deal then, he agreed easily enough before turning to face her fully again with renewed determination gleaming in his brown eyes. Later that evening, as they shared dinner alone away from prying eyes or official duties, Derek found himself more at ease than ever before. He had never once expected to find a place of such significance among those who ruled galaxies. It was humbling and exhilarating all at once. Why did you save me? Cirrus asked, suddenly breaking the comfortable silence between them as they ate slowly together in private quarters designated for her use now that she could finally reside there comfortably again without fear of capture or betrayal. Derek paused mid-chew, swallowing carefully before shrugging casually despite how deeply he had been thinking about this very question himself over recent days. Right thing, was all he said simply, but with profound conviction echoing through his voice and eyes when looking up at Cirrus now. She nodded slowly, as if contemplating the weight of those two simple words, her gaze softening into a contemplative regard that spoke volumes without needing to say more. For what it's worth, saving you was also right. Her hand reached out again, placing itself gently over his on top of their shared dinner plate, then squeezing lightly in reassurance. He felt heat rise up through him once more, a blush creeping across cheeks, but this time not entirely from embarrassment alone. There was something genuine about her gratitude and respect for such a simple act. It resonated with the same deep sense of purpose that had driven his actions initially months ago when he first noticed Cirrus being dragged away. Cirrus took Derek's hand again, then, holding it lightly between both hers as she looked deeply into his eyes. Thank you, she whispered earnestly, now without pretense or reserve. He blinked slowly before offering a shy smile back up at her, warmth spreading through him despite how unaccustomed he still felt to such attention and praise after years of going unnoticed in the shadows. As HFY, signaling another new day amidst their ongoing transformation towards true unity across species rather than enforced conformity under tyranny, Derek stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing now that sometimes courage took form not just grand gestures witnessed by millions, but quiet acts performed for sake of truth and justice, even in darkness. And so, with Empress Cirrus for Dominion at the helm, Derek Shaw prepared himself alongside her, not merely as maintenance chief or advisor, but part something greater being built. Every day a world reeling from recent upheavals now held breath, waiting for next chapter shaped by shared ideals rather than imposed ones. Their future was bright, they were ready to shape it together without fear and with unwavering loyalty. End.